But Zerubbabel, Jerusha, and the rest of the heads of the house of Israel said to them, you have nothing to do with us in building a house to our God, but we alone will build to the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus of the king of Persia has commanded us. This may seem harsh when you just read this section. This may seem very harsh that they shut out the Samaritans. But there's a backstory that we don't get from this particular passage. The backstory is that the Samaritans had so polluted their faith that it was, yes, it was recognizable. They recognized the same God, Yahweh, the God of Israel. They recognized the same God, but their worship was completely different. It would be almost like us taking and going to two different churches. It would almost be as if we would go to, let's say go to the Catholic Church and worship God. And we would go with some of my Amish friends and we would go worship God with them. We have two vastly different systems of worship for the same God. Okay? The Jewish people saw this. They recognized it for what it was. Not only had the Samaritan people violated God's laws by marrying non-believers, but there were certain elements and aspects of idolatry that they had brought into their worship of God. So they wanted nothing to do with them. They did not want the Samaritan people to pollute the temple that they were about to rebuild. So their standing was solid. Their decision was well-founded, even though if we just look at Ezra chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, it would seem harsh. As I mentioned, I want to make a couple of notes here. Number one is the Samaritans viewed themselves as God's people, even though they had altered and changed the way they worshiped God to a great extent. Number two, the Jews saw them as having corrupted their faith to a point that Ezra refers to them in this particular passage as the adversaries of Judah. Now, we could go on here. I think it would do us well to go on into verse 4. Then the people of the land, this is the Samaritans, discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build and bribed the counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Now, if we looked at Nehemiah chapter 4, we'd find a little bit more information. Nehemiah and Ezra are writing at about the same time of their experiences in rebuilding the temple and Jerusalem. Not only did they bribe officials to prevent this work from progressing, but in Nehemiah chapter 4 and in verse 10, it says, in Judah it was said, the strength of those who bear the burden is failing. There is too much rubble. By ourselves we will not be able to rebuild the wall. This is the wall of Jerusalem. And our enemies said, they will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop work. At that time, the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us, 10 times you must return to us. So they're discouraging the work even more. Now, Since Samaria was not allowed to have a temple, what was their solution? Let's look at Nehemiah chapter 13. And I think we find a very interesting situation. We have here the son of Jehoiada. He's not named in this particular passage. Now I want you to see Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 28. This son of Jehoiada had married a non-believer. And one of the sons of Jehoiada, son of Ishlebai, the high priest, was the son-in-law of Sanballat, the Hornite. Okay? He's married a Hornite woman. Therefore, Nehemiah says, I chased him from me. Remember them, O my God, because they have desecrated the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. This is the passage that piqued my interest. Nehemiah says, thus I cleansed them from everything foreign, and I established the duties of the priests and Levites, each in his work. And I provided for the wood offering at the appointed time. I provided for the wood offering at appointed times and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. Now, so Nehemiah has ordered everyone to separate themselves from ungodly relationships. Marriages, some were marriages, but if I understand the Hebrew language right, some of these relationships were not marriages at all. They were simply living together in sin. They were not marriages, but living together in sin. So that there's a little bit of a translation from the Hebrew to the English language that I ran across that is a little bit different and sometimes misleading. So it's my synopsis that the sons of Jehoiada was not actually the son-in-law of Sanballat, the Hornite, but he was living in a sinful relationship with Hornite's daughter. Okay? I think we need to be clear on that. This was a passage, though, that perked my interest in the Samaritans. We are now at 432 BC. Sanballat set up a sanctuary because of his son-in-law. Now, this is not, we don't have this in biblical text. This is historical documents. Okay? And this is in the writings of the Samaritans. Sanballat set up a sanctuary in Mount Gerizim. Remember that name, Mount Gerizim. And if you remember right, I mentioned the city of Shechem. Okay? Shechem sits on Mount Gerizim. So Sanballat set up a sanctuary to worship God on Mount Gerizim. All right, so we've got Shechem is marked on the map with the yellow arrow. Just to give you the idea, Samaria is to the north, the capital of Samaria, and Shechem is just a little bit to the southeast, if you will. And Shechem is the location of Mount Gerizim. If you remember in John chapter 4, the Samaritan woman said to Jesus, where's the proper place to worship? She said, our fathers worshipped in this mountain. The mountain she refers to is Mount Gerizim. Okay? Now, what we go on, if we were to look, is we would find that not only did they set up a sanctuary, but down the road they built a temple. patterned after the Jewish temple. All right? They set this sanctuary up in Mount Gerizim.